Welcome back to the third part of a series of videos going into detail about RWBY's villains. I've already talked about Adam and the White Fang and Cinder's faction. If you finish this video and you want to see more, why not go ahead and check out those videos too. Now, onto the topic of today. The other guys. The other smaller villains, or at least antagonists that don't really fit into any other category. So here we go. A closer look at what makes RWBY's villains so bad.
You're gonna pay for this.
Melanie, who is this girl? I don't know, Milsha, but we should teach her a lesson.
Minor characters who showed up to fight Yang in the Yellow trailer, and made a small appearance during Volume 2. They're really just characters to help show off Yang's fighting abilities. The three gave a range of different fighting techniques, so it was a perfect example of Yang's different combat skills. I really doubt they'll be making any more appearances in the show. However, they were fun characters, seeing how Junior became more of like a dopey informant, becoming sort of friend to Yang. And Melanie and Milsha's snobby girl personalities are also fun when bouncing off of the more down-to-earth nature of Junior or Yang. But like I said, no matter how fun they are, I doubt they'll be coming back. And that's fine. I really can't think of a good reason for them to show back up.
Subject! Well, I know it's a lot easier to train an animal than a soldier.
A typical bully who was the main antagonist of Jean's Volume 1 arc. Cardin, I feel, had a lot of potential, but unfortunately never really popped back up in the show. I feel like he could have been a more prominent figure that was a sort of bully for the whole cast during their time at Beacon. I think they could have used him to help push some character moments forward. Like, if in the beginning of Volume 2 he had an altercation with Blake and Weiss, showing that they're getting over their fondness issues from the end of Volume 1. I don't know, I think he could have been a stronger character for the cast than they let him be. Because Cardin is interesting in how they've established him. He's a stereotypical bully, yes, but he's also smart enough to seemingly read at least some of the homework Jean wrote for him. It also speaks a lot to his character about how he decided to stop tormenting Jean. Jean didn't threaten him or best him in a fight, he stood his ground and protected Cardin, despite Cardin's bullying. Cardin either respects Jean too much, or is too ashamed of his own actions to continue bullying him. I feel like there's a lot of missed potential with Cardin and his woefully underutilized team. Antagonists that don't actually fight. Weiss's overbearing father and snotty little brother. Jacques is really the whole reason for Weiss's internal turmoil. Spend 5 seconds listening to any of her songs and you'll understand the magnitude of how he has made her feel small and insignificant. Even though at the end of Volume 4, Weiss stood her ground and fled, I feel like this isn't the end of his hold on Weiss. Clearly, she still seems conflicted with her family, and during Volume 6, she's really against having to go back to Atlas. She never really faced Jacques and addressed all of her issues with him. She just escaped the home. I feel like there's strong potential for Weiss to have an ultimate moment with her father that'll make a new resolution for her character. Sort of like Blake with the death of Adam. Whitley, however, is a different story. He doesn't really feel like a true antagonist. Rather, he feels more like a symbol of everything Weiss doesn't want to be. Weiss is working towards changing how people feel about the Schnee Dust Company. Whitley is everything she's trying to distance herself from. In some ways, he's also a representation of how Weiss has developed as a character. It's not hard to find similarities between Whitley and Weiss from her introduction in Volume 1. Now that Jacques has taken the title of heir and passed it down to his son, he does have something that Weiss will want to get back. With the crew making their way back to Atlas for Volume 7, I feel like the Schnees have a lot of potential for the show.
This base, that relay tower, the very safety of Argus are all gifts from the glorious kingdom of Atlas.
Cordo is really minor as far as antagonists go. Her reasoning for not letting anyone go to Atlas boils down to, I don't wanna. However, I can't deny that I really enjoy her character. She's much more comedic for an antagonist, and I love her over-the-top nature and theatrical delivery. While I have a lot of problems with the kids' plan of stealing an airship for Volume 6 finale, I can admit that if I ignore those problems with the plot, I do enjoy the fight with her mech. It's fun, and they use everyone's fighting abilities in unique ways, and Cordo's realization that she let her own feelings of grandeur blind her to her true meaning of position, to protect the people, was a really great turning point for her. For once, RWBY's friendship speech actually changed someone's mind. Wow! I don't think Cordo will be in the show anymore, unless it's like a really minor cameo kind of thing, and I'm not sure what purpose she would have if she did show up in the show. But regardless, I thoroughly enjoyed the time we spent with her. You know, I guess I could have included these two in the Adam and the White Fang video, but honestly I completely forgot they existed. Let's be real, these two are just pointless. They left no impact, and I don't even know why they bothered to make them unique looking characters. Like, why not just generic White Fang soldiers? They could have done something to help give them some actual character. Maybe if they were working on a team with Ilya, and Ilya worked with Blake to stop them, as like a true sign of her turning to the good guys. Then they would leave the Albane brothers to Sun and Gira, like how the fight started. But it's really too late for something like that, and I'm 100% confident Bruce Wayne and Gwen Stacy won't be in the show anymore. Now, that was all the more minor characters, so I'll be a little bit more in depth with the characters coming up. But before that, I want to give honorable mention to Sienna and Talk. They were short-lived and cool. They had unique designs and creative abilities. I hope we get to see more permanent characters with as much thought as these two.
So funny. Oh, I don't know if it's more funny or sad, but you're clearly out of the loop.
Vernal probably has the most wasted potential out of these characters. She could have been a bigger deal. She could have been a bigger character. Her death could have really meant something, but unfortunately, she's just a waste. She's supposed to be a red herring, pretending she's the Spring Maiden so no one hunts down the real Spring Maiden, Raven. It's super disappointing how underutilized this aspect of her is. She doesn't seem bothered by this, or even like it affects her person at all. I wish they would have gotten at least one scene where she talks to Raven about this. The scene after they talk to Cinder in their camp could have been a great scene for Vernal. Give her character some depth before she has to die. Have dialogue that won't spoil the surprise, but have her and Raven address the upcoming battle. Maybe Vernal is scared. Maybe she's too cocky to be scared. Maybe she's too loyal and devoted to Raven to worry at all. Honestly, more scenes in general with Vernal would have been great for Volume 5. Really let the audience believe she's the Maiden before revealing the twist. Or at least make the audience care if she dies or not. I almost forgot Vernal even died at the end of Volume 5. Her death left so little of an impact on me because I had no idea what her character was. The scene was important not because of a character death, but because we found out Raven was the Maiden. They also pretend Vernal has some sort of rivalry thing with Weiss that goes nowhere. She taunts Weiss when she's been captured, but that's as far as that goes. Later at the attack on Haven, they pair up to fight each other, so I guess that was all the setup they needed? One conversation and now they're in a death match! If this was supposed to be set up, why not go into a little more depth with their animosity between each other? The scene where Yang and Weiss talk to Raven in her tent could have been a great opportunity for that kind of exploring into Vernal's character. Rather than just have Raven monologue exposition at the girls, why not include Vernal and have her continue to develop a rivalry with Weiss? She even shows up to point her ring blade gun at Yang, but then she doesn't do anything after that. Vernal is just a huge missed opportunity, and she was too short-lived to really matter much in the long run. Sorry, Vernal. You should have been cool. Too bad Volume 5 was just too terrible to give you the writing you deserved.
Because Vernal isn't the Spring Maiden. I am!
Well, I guess while we're on Vernal, we should talk about the leader of her tribe. Raven is a great big bag of worms to try to unravel. Honestly, she was set up really well. Her first appearance on the train to save Yang was mind-blowing. Who is this mystery woman who just shows up out of nowhere and scares Neo away just by pulling out her gigantic sword? With the after-credits scene in Volume 2 hinting at her being related to Yang, everyone was flipping out. Yang had just gone into detail about how she's been looking for her mother since she was little. Raven's introduction seems like an amazing plot point for the show. A super badass woman who's the centerpiece to a big character arc for Yang? Yes, please! Volume 3 only made Raven seem more interesting of a character. Crow goes into a little bit of detail about his twin, and seemed to only strengthen Yang's determination to find her long-lost mother. So it's a truly special talent to take all this amazing setup and fuck it up as royally as they did. Volume 4 rolls around and we get our first extensive conversation with Raven, and it was lackluster. Her and Crow's conversation is the most boring talking scene in the whole volume. You would think that these twins who clearly have large resentments with each other would have something interesting to say. Crow just spent a lot of time with Yang. Maybe she would play an important part in their conversation? Hell, at the very least, would they talk about Ty or Summer? Right? Right? Raven's whole dialogue boils down to just exposition about herself. The twins' conversation is just the two talking in circles around each other. Crow wants to know about the Spring Maiden, and Raven wants to know about the relic. Both want information, but neither is willing to give it. The entire scene is fucking pointless in the long run. It was a pretty drab introduction to most of Raven's personality, but I was willing to give her a second chance. Clearly, the Bronwyns hate each other. Maybe they just refuse to have a real conversation due to their resentment. Maybe things will be better next time, right? Nope! Apparently, Raven secretly wanted to be a history teacher, because all of her dialogue in Volume 5 is just lore exposition. Her conversation with Yang is even worse than her talk with Crow, and holy crap, what a fucking disappointment that scene was in general. Yang has been looking for Raven since she was a child. This was her whole character motivations for the last 4 volumes, and you drop the ball when it comes to her finally finding her mom. First of all, Yang finds her so fucking easily. She just wanders into one bandit and knows he's going to direct her right to her mom, and then she just strolls into her bandit camp. Oh, okay. She makes it look so easy. It seems like she was just too stupid to find her beforehand, or like she wasn't ever really trying to find Raven that hard. Raven congratulates her on being strong enough to finally find her, like it's just been one long game of hide and seek. Bitch, you abandoned your own daughter! Then she's all surprised that Yang isn't being chummy with her. Well, why do you think Yang is pissed at you? You abandoned her! Raven's motivations for abandoning her team, her husband, her whole family was just, well, I was curious if my daughter really could find me. No reason as to why. And even worse, Yang doesn't even confront Raven about that abandonment. Remember, Yang has been looking for Raven since she was just a little girl. But when she finally meets her mother, she has nothing to say. And it's not like, finally seeing you in person, I realize I never cared about you, having nothing to say. Yang sounds like a pissed-off teen who wants to argue with her mom for being grounded. Mildly miffed should not have been Yang's delivery for her lines. Neither of them sound surprised to even see each other. What the fuck were the writers thinking? Yang has no questions for Raven. Literally, any kind of question you think someone would ask after finally meeting their mother for the first time never gets asked. In fact, it seems Yang doesn't really want to talk to Raven at all. She wants to use her teleportal as soon as possible to get back to RWBY. Well, dumbass, if you wanted to get to RWBY so bad, why the fuck did you waste your time hunting down your mother first? Oscar takes a train to Haven. Was it that hard to find a train station near the docks where you landed? You're already in Mistral. Why did you think finding your hide-and-seek master mom would be a faster plan than just going straight to the school RWBY told you she was going to? Really, this scene is the ultimate disappointment for Raven's character. It's so poorly handled, both by her and her daughter, and it just stripped away anything worthwhile from Raven's character. I don't care if she was a badass against Neo. I don't care if she's secretly a maiden. This botched scene ruins her character for me so bad. I assume Raven's not done with the story. She is still the Spring Maiden, and that's still a big factor for the plot of the series. You know, if they ever get to actually developing that plot. But I don't give a shit about Raven anymore. Her biggest character moment was a complete flop, and every time she opens her mouth, she just word vomits a history book about all the boring lore Miles and Carrie were really excited to think about, but doesn't actually contribute to the actual story. What a joke.
I'm helping her for the same reason you are. I'm afraid. We can't stop her.
Even as far back as Volume 1, I've felt that when given entirely free reign over designing something, Miles and Carrie really aren't that very creative. Looking at the first weapon they were in charge of designing, Professor Port's axe musket, was what made me come to that decision. And Lionheart feels like a whole character to embody that lack of creative design. He's supposed to be based off of the Cowardly Lion from The Wizard of Oz, like how the rest of Ozpin's crew are other members from the story. However, it feels like they don't give any more thought into his character than is a coward and is a lion. The other members of Ozpin's Wizard of Oz crew have some unique attributes that allude to their inspired fairy tale, but also have some interesting elements of the character that make them their own unique person. Leo does not. Ignoring the fact his name is basically just Lion. Super creative! Everything about Leo is just so uninspired. He just cowers and shuffles around. He's mostly just used for setting up the plot of Volume 5. I don't understand why they didn't give him a stronger presence in the volume. It's the same thing as Renal. They die the same volume they're introduced, but we spend so little time with them that it's easy to forget they were ever even there. The concept of a double crosser deep in the hero's midst is actually a really interesting idea, but just like every idea with a little bit of potential, they drop the ball with execution. Other than getting the villains to show up at the end of the volume, he doesn't do anything. Like, all volume. He only shows up briefly, then Salem kills him. He really feels like the antithesis of everything that made Ironwood an interesting character when we first met him. And on top of that, I don't know why Salem killed him anyway. I guess to punctuate Raven when she said,
Salem only uses people until they are no longer useful.
But like, Leo could have still been useful. it feels like the writers killed him off because they found him boring, or because their convoluted plot would have been even more confusing with his addition in the long run. Again, their lack of creativity has stunted his whole character for the short while he lasted. Speaking of lacking creativity, what the fuck is with his boring as balls design? Hey, let's make his primary color brown, and then his accents also brown. He looks like a dust bunny. Also, let's be real. Port's weapon might be lame, but Leo's stupid-ass shield takes the cake in dumb weapon designs. Tiny shield that can only shoot gross meatball-looking shit animation blobs at people, but only if you hold it like a Yu-Gi-Oh toy. No thought. Literally just zero effort designing this really important character. Jeez Louise.
What about her? Seems to me like this is Cinder's problem, not ours.
With Volume 4, we were officially introduced to Salem's own council, often referred to in the fandom as Team Witch. The member of that team we've gotten the least time with is Arthur Watts. I was actually really confused. Volume 4, we got an encounter with Tyrian. Volume 5, we got more Hazel. I assumed Volume 6 was Watts' turn to shine. Our heroes are heading to Atlas. He's a disgraced Atlassian scientist. I figured it was a no-brainer, but unfortunately, it never happened. He's been a villain for 3 years, but he really hasn't done anything yet. Like, he hasn't even done anything that could classify him as a villain. All he's done is hang out with the villains and act like a dick to people. Volume 4, he was a dick to Cinder. I actually really liked this because it was nice seeing someone finally say the things to Cinder I always wanted to say. But after that, he vanished from the volume. We even got a glimpse of Hazel later on, but Watts only made a small appearance menacing at Leo at the very end. Then in Volume 5, he had a bit of a stronger presence, being a dick to Raven. Though, if we're honest, his role in their negotiation was pretty pointless. He doesn't say anything to Raven that matters, but what he does say to Cinder is actually important. He's trying to tell Cinder to be cautious about the deal with working with Raven and Vernal. Unfortunately, the scene is so boring and poorly written, it's hard to even pay attention to him. I understand where that scene could have been interesting, but it's the fact that it's drawn out so much and the characters insist on talking in circles. The scene becomes easy to forget. And on top of that, Watts doesn't really add anything to his own character we haven't already seen. He's been a dick to Cinder, and he was giving advice while still sounding like a dick. Volume 5, we also saw him with Leo, but really, let's be honest, nothing happened to that scene either. Like most of Volume 5. Once again, he's being an ass. I'm fine with his main personality trait being axe-assholey to everyone, but my biggest problem is how little screen time he's actually gotten. Axe-assholey is his only character trait so far because we haven't spent any time with him. I don't know if he even actually has a weapon. Like, I'm not sure if he's an opponent that would fight or engage in battle. They haven't really put Watts in a position where we can get a real good sense of his skills. He confirms he's a scientist, and he's an excellent roboticist, seeing as how he made Tyrion's new tail. I don't know, he's just sort of nebulous. I can't tell if his building prowess is really something to be impressed by. RWBY told us most students build their own weapons. And honestly, I would say RWBY's craftsmanship on Crescent Rose is on par or better than the build of Tyrion's tail. Not just Crescent Rose, but other students' weapons too. Sun's gunchucks, Velvet's camera, Penny's... well, actually, all of Penny. Robotic limbs are pretty common in this world, and Tyrion's tail doesn't seem very impressive when we see Atlassian knights walking around, or a robot so humanoid she passes for a real girl. It's just hard to really consider Watts a threat when he's been shoved so far in the background. I really do wish we got to see him be more prominent in Volume 6. Now I just have to sit here and wait for Volume 7 and hope he'll finally get some much-needed screen time.
My little flower, I'm here to whisk you away with me.
Well, what if she doesn't want to go with you?
Well, I'll take her.
Of Team Witch, Tyrian is definitely my favorite. Being the crazy one isn't exactly an original idea when it comes to villainous teams in media, but I think Tyrian still makes the role fun. It helps that his voice actor, Josh Greeley, is clearly enjoying every last second of Tyrion's over-the-top antics. What we've seen of him so far is already some really good building blocks for his character. He's sometimes pretty stereotypically crazy, laughing maniacally like the fucking Joker or something, but we've also seen him cowering before Salem. I enjoy seeing him every time he's on screen, even if his dialogue does tend to fall flat for me. While addressing Team Ranger, I was surprised to hear him use much more elevated vocabulary than I was expecting. Most crazy people in media tend to be portrayed with lower intelligence. They use broken English or simplified vernacular. But Tyrian almost talks Shakespearean. While I appreciate this unique trait, I'm glad they didn't just follow the typical tropes for his character. It tends to make his dialogue drag. This is most apparent in Volume 6 when he talks to Emerald and Mercury. Since his language is so flowery and long-winded, it tends to make the scenes drag their heels a bit. And it can also be hard to really get his point, too. Emerald wasn't the only one confused by what Tyrian was trying to tell them. I had to watch the scene a second time to fully get what he was saying. Overall, Tyrian is a fun character, an obvious threat, and someone I enjoy being on screen. Weird, I know. The second half of this video has been pretty negative, but I honestly have very little complaints about Tyrian. Tyrian is an enjoyable antagonist, and from what we've seen of him already, I feel like his characterization is off to a strong start. His biggest detriment is that he's a relatively new character, and we haven't gotten as much screen time with him as our better developed antagonists. One thing is I'm curious on learning more about his past, but really I feel that way for all of our antagonists. It's a pretty unusual situation they've all banded together for. Helping an ancient magical witch find special girls to open magical doors inside of schools to get special relics so she can get back at her ex-husband. It's a pretty out there scenario, and I feel like understanding the circumstances that brought any of these characters to decide to follow Salem would really help give a lot more insight into who these people are. In Tyrion's case, I can make the most educated guess on his reasonings for following Salem. He thinks she's a god. Watching her backstory with Ozma, there was a time where the two were revered by the common people for their use of magic. Based on her dialogue, she seems really into the idea of people worshipping her like a deity, and Tyrion is probably like those people who worshipped her in the past. His devotion to her is like none other in the show, and I'm curious how Salem came across such a faithful follower. Regardless, I want to see more of Tyrion. When everyone else on screen is gloomy, broody, and taking everything so seriously, Tyrion's tropey crazy shtick is a breath of fresh air.
Don't let such a small obstacle block your path.
Hazel, in my opinion, is the biggest disappointment when it comes to the villains. Hazel seems pretty cool right from his first appearance. He's quiet, he's lethargic, he seems like a genuinely okay guy. And then Ozpin expressed fear when he started to approach Oscar. Ozpin hardly ever seems that on edge, so what could it be about Hazel that he's so worried about? Hazel's past with Ozpin is what made me excited to see him take on a more prominent role in Volume 5. Seeing him arrive at Sienna's honestly made me thrilled to see what was going to happen in the volume. Oops, we all know how that turned out. His interactions with Adam after Sienna's murder makes Hazel seem endearing. He's polite, he's caring, he seems like a genuinely good guy. So what could it be that Ozpin did that made Hazel a threat? Since Volume 3, I had a sneaking suspicion that Ozpin had actually done something really horrible. It's Cinder's line of,
"She was right about you. Such arrogance."
Cinder sounds like she honestly thinks Ozpin is a bad guy. It sounds like she thinks she's doing the right thing, and she's not the villain in her mind. It's Oz. Ever since, I've been eagerly watching the show, waiting for one of the villains to go into detail about Ozpin, to see if my assumptions on Cinder's stance was true. Volume 6 kinda gave us something on that, but before then, other characters would hint at it more and more. Finally, in the Volume 5 finale arrives, and Hazel prompts Oz to go into detail about his past, and what a dumb story it is.
Gretchen Reinhardt was Hazel's sister. She enrolled at Beacon Academy to become a huntress. Tragically lost her life on a training mission. Hazel holds me responsible.
What? Did the writers not realize how stupid this is? Hazel's blame feels completely random. First, she was in school for becoming a huntress. That's already a dangerous job. People die all the time, even while in training for more dangerous professions, like police officer or firefighter. Next, she had a team with her. Oz says she was on a mission. You can only be assigned missions after you form a team during orientation. And if we look at Team RWBY for specifics, it seems you're only allowed on missions after you finish your first semester. Why isn't Hazel blaming her teammates? Why weren't they there to help protect her? Well, maybe they all died. Okay, well, what about their teacher? First years are shown to have an accompanying adult with them on their mission. Juniper said they were following a sheriff, and RWBY had Dr. Oobleck. Why isn't Hazel blaming the teacher who accompanied her team on that fatal mission? The only time I've seen kids go on a mission without the assistance of an adult are if they're older, like Team Coffee. I don't think they had anyone with them when they were at Mountain Glen. Or if the kids decide to sneak out and do their own thing, like RWBY's secret mission that ended in their paladin fight. In both scenarios, there's still only a small margin when you could be blaming the headmaster for that kind of death. It's either she should have been old enough to handle a mission with her team on their own, or they put themselves in that dangerous position without proper adult supervision. And on top of all that, why is Hazel seeking revenge on people who are only to blame in an obtuse way, instead of blaming the actual killers? Oz doesn't specify what killed her. Was it a plane crash or something? Why not seek revenge on the plane's mechanic? Was it bandits? Why not go and kill all the bandits in the world? The worst thing is if it were Grimm. If Grimm killed her, then why would he be working with Salem instead of seeking revenge against her? Blaming Oz for Gretchen's death is contrived and stupid. As if the writers wrote that scene in Volume 4 to make Hazel seem cool and dramatic, and when people were really excited to know what happened, they ran out of time and just used the first thing they thought of. His sister died at Beacon, he blames Oz. That'll work, I guess. It also makes Hazel a gigantic hypocrite. He blames Oz for the death of a kid, but then goes around smashing the shit out of our heroes. It's so dumb the more you think about it. The only saving grace is if Ozpin is lying to Oscar. He's shown he's been only half honest with our heroes before. Maybe he left out some important details with her death. Maybe it was a similar situation with Pyrrha, trying to force his maiden crap on her. But even still, the awful way they've handled Hazel's motivations is such a letdown. Finally, for once, the writers actually let us in on the motivations behind one of our villains' actions, and it's this laughable excuse for a backstory? I'm not even sure I want to know the motivations of the other characters if it's just going to ruin them like how it's done with Hazel. Watching Volume 6, every time Hazel's on screen, I no longer feel that intrigue or that excitement. I just feel disappointed. I know his character could be better, should be better, but the writers just shot him in the foot to the point I really don't care if he gets much more screen time. His character motivations are forced, he becomes a gigantic hypocrite if he does fight, and watching him fight is boring to begin with. Why don't you have a weapon? His combat style of run up and punch makes for super drab fight choreography. It's everything about him. Like I said, Hazel is just disappointing. And that was everyone. At least for now. I'm sure there'll be other villains who will pop up in the future volumes, and I'm sure some of the villains I talked about here can grow or develop in that time too. Now, there's only one more video left for the series of RWBY villains, and trust me, this is going to be a big one. Alrighty, I hope you liked that video. I had a lot of fun with it, kind of going over everybody. Let me know your ideas in comments. I'm pretty sure I didn't miss anybody, but if I did, let me know, because that would suck. I remember Triva and Yuma, but I don't remember some other important character. Let me know your thoughts and opinions. I'm sure, since there were so many, you might have had, like, a lot of differing opinions on some. You might disagree or agree. I want to know. All your thoughts and ideas, lay them on me. Leave them in the comments below. I'd love to hear all of them. If you want to help me out, I do have a Patreon. It's Judgmental Critter. There are lots of fun stuff if you do that. I would really love any kind of help and support you can give. Anything at all, it helps in the long run. I would really, really appreciate it, and I just thank you so much if you do. So yeah, if you want to do me a favor, like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye!